Hello, YouTube watchers. I wanted to make a video today and walk you through the method that I use at the Calgary Language Nerds to predict progress. When developing my guaranteed fluency program over the past 2 years now, as I'm recording this on October 28th, 2025, I've been able to find a way to predict student progress. Now, there's a very detailed process, which I'll walk you through today. I don't usually share it with students because it is rather intimidating, but it is something that I want to document. Furthermore, you know, when I talk to a lot of language learners and I tell them that, hey, look, we can actually predict with a reasonable degree of accuracy when someone will be fluent by, often people go, what? How could that be? Is that possible? Like, no, come on. There are too many factors to take into account. So this is my attempt to show you exactly what I do, and so you can understand, well, the process behind how we do it, because there is an actual process and it does spit out a relatively accurate estimation. There are some tools I'll show you as well that come into play here. There's a level up tracker, which I'd like to show you. I'll show you a filled out example of the tracker as well. And of course, there's the personalized learning plan, which will come into play for this video too. So here are the 5 steps that I generally follow. So first, I look at FSI data. It's kind of a logical process. I convert it to hours per level. I then convert hours into months and years. I then layer in my expertise and student goals. That's more of an intuitive process. And then we adjust as student data comes in. So let's talk about each step. So first things first, we look at the Foreign Service Institute website. The Foreign Service Institute provides foreign language training to US government employees for job-related purposes. And they actually have published their data on how long it takes on average for students to reach an upper intermediate level. There's 4 different categories of languages. In short, category 1 languages are easier and faster to learn for native English speakers. The further down the list we go, the harder it gets. So if we look at their hardest category, category 4 languages, it's a significantly longer learning journey. Now, when you look at 3,500 hours, 1,700 hours, 1,400 hours, like when you look at all these hours, like it's like, whoa, that's a lot of hours. Like it just looks like a big number. It's very, very intimidating. So the next step, what I do to predict how long it will take someone to learn, is I convert these hours into hours per level. So this is a total number of hours to quote unquote become fluent, to reach an upper intermediate level, which is a pretty darn fluent level, right? But how long does it take to become low beginner? How long for high beginner? We don't know. So I convert it. And I've done some basic math and essentially figured out that if you're learning an easy language, 300 hours per level, a kind of a semi-easy language, 360 per level, 440 per level, and the hardest would be 880 hours per level. Now, again, that's still not that helpful, is it? Because you go, well, you know how many hours, but that's not that helpful. Like, it's very difficult to think in hours. So the next thing I do is I convert hours into months and years. Now, again, I know this might sound relatively, intimidating. And the point is, usually I just tell people like, hey, this is how long it'll take. But this is all the background work. This is what's happening in the background to actually give people a reasonably accurate prediction of when they'll be fluent by. So if we look here, right, easy languages with 15 minutes of study per day, it takes about 3 years to level up. On the other end of the spectrum, if you study 2 hours per day, it would take you about 5 months to level up. As you can see on the screen, the harder the language is, the longer it takes. So the absolute, like some of the hardest languages, if you're doing about 15 minutes of study per day, it will take you 10 years to level up from, for example, low beginner to high beginner, or high beginner to low intermediate. Like it will be a long process. And so this is one of the reasons why one core part of my course is to coach people and teach people and encourage people, give them tools, strategies, motivation, accountability to be spending, most languages are not going to be this category 4. They're not going to be that hard, frankly. most of the time we actually end up seeing people in category 1, right? It's actually pretty typical, which we'll talk about more in a sec. But I usually get people doing, like, if we can get them to do 30 minutes a day, right? 1.5 years is a long time, but it's also not a long time. It is a long time, but it's also not like 10 years, especially when we look at step number 4. So this is really cool. This is my favorite step, I would say. Step 4 is more of an art than a science. See, all those numbers we looked at above, right? All these numbers, it's just a starting point, right? First of all, it's assuming someone uses an adequate learning method. If your learning method stinks, it'll take longer. It'll take even longer. I mean, you'll never make it to any level of real fluency that you're aiming for. The other thing we have to look at too is your student goals. The goals that students have usually mean, usually, it reduces the amount of time needed. So I'll give a really common example. A really common example would be when people reach out for classes at the Calgary Language Nerds, they're not necessarily interested in spending a lot of time on writing. But the Foreign Service Institute up here, when they provide language learning estimates, it is, from what I can tell, from what I know, I do think that it is a very overall exam. I could actually be wrong about that. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty darn sure that it's a very comprehensive, like, it is based, there's writing included in there. Or another example could be, someone just wants to be really conversational and they're not overly obsessed over every single grammar mistake, right? Maybe to go past your ILR exam, the exam you would take, maybe you'd have to be perfect in certain categories or very, very good in certain categories. But for the average language learner, we don't need to worry about all the things you would need to worry about to pass an exam, right? Or to get a language for job-related purposes. So frequently, once we hit step 4, we start to realize that learning probably is going to take less time than we thought, which is really motivating and really exciting. Now, the 5th step, the final step, is adjust as student data comes in. So now I want to show you some of the tools that we use. So at the Calgary Language Nerds, one of the things that we do that's very unique is we collect a lot of data about student progress. One of the core key tools that we use is called the Level Up Tracker. And so I'll actually show you one that's filled out first so you can see what it looks like. Looks like this. This is mine, personally, for Ukrainian, right? You can see a summary. It's automatically generated, automatic. So you don't have to make it yourself. It happens like magic. You see a summary of how I spent all my study time, listening, speaking, reading, etc. You can see on this side here the number of hours I have spent on each learning activity. It automatically totals everything up for me. So I've studied 183 hours. I have 92 hours left before I hit my goal. And at the very bottom, this is where I log day by day how I spent my study time, right? So I started on June 2nd, as you can see, all the way down to today's date, we're in October, right? Today we're at August 28th. So I've actually done more than this. I've done, actually have to look at my notes. I've done more than 45 minutes today. But anyway, point is, this is the section where we log all the study hours. If you are someone who likes to really look at data, if you know, that's perfectly fine. This is stuff that again, all the stuff I'm showing you today, this is like behind the scenes stuff that we do. You don't necessarily have to worry too much about most of this. We do it all behind the scenes. For you, it just looks like a normal class, but we're doing a ton of stuff behind the scenes. This is the stuff we do behind the scenes. So if we scroll over here, right on the right-hand side, we can see how much time you're studying per day on average, how much time you're studying per month. That's your monthly average, per month on average. And this allows us to get an insight into your motivation levels, right? Like if I was doing 30 minutes a day versus the next month, 45 minutes a day, clearly something was different where I was extra motivated or maybe had extra time, who knows, to be doing more studying during that next month, right? So this is one of the tools we use. We have assessment data as well, right? That we input into this document. Usually for students, the main document, if we look over here, one of the main documents we use is called the personalized learning plan. It's a much cleaner document, really, really easy to look through. And this is usually where we take a lot of the data from here, which is like very, very numbers based and very not for everyone, let's just say. And we put it into here. So it's nice and clean and easier to look at, easier to process, right? So, etc. And of course, through with conversations with the tutor, you can also start to understand what's happening behind what's happening in when we're looking at all this data. So yeah, so this is kind of what we do, like behind the scenes, right? This is behind the scenes where what we're doing to help people to predict how long it'll take for them to reach their fluency goals. So the last thing I was saying, I forgot to say this. The last thing I was saying is adjusting as student data comes in. So we're collecting all this data. We can then look at that data and predict future progress. We can say, wow, it looks like we estimated that you would reach XYZ level in this amount of time. Now we're 3 months in, we can see your real data. Wow, it looks like it's going to take a little bit longer, or it looks like it'll be a little bit shorter, or it looks like you're progressing really well in this area, but not well in this area. Okay, let's change how we study to fill in that gap, for example. So yeah, that's that. Pretty interesting stuff. This is what happens, again, all behind the scenes. When you're the student, you don't really see a lot of this because we're doing this mostly in the background, but this is what's happening. A lot of my blog, especially on Substack, YouTube, not as much, but on my Substack, a lot of what I post is like behind the scenes stuff, which is like hyper detailed. But anyway, that's that. Thank you for watching. See you next time.